I'm Loki Karuna, and this is TRILLOQUY. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks to all the folks returning to the podcast, and welcome to everyone who is new or relatively new to the show. Always great to hear from folks who have recently discovered the TRILLOQUY podcast. If you'd like more information, to learn more about some of the folks that have made it possible, to check out past opuses and to contribute to TRILLOQUY, go over to the website TRILLOQY.org. I'm really happy, really pleased to introduce to you in this opus of TRILLOQUY pianist Min Kwon. Min Kwon has recently, or I guess over the past few years, engaged in a project called America/Beautiful. So this is a collection of works for solo piano that allows a number of different composers, artists to respond and write variations on the tune America the Beautiful in their various ways. So this includes contributions to this by George Lewis, by Vijay Iyer, all sorts of composers. We'll hear Daniel Bernard Romain's contribution to this project here shortly. But in addition to leading this collaborative commissioning project, Min Kwon teaches over at Rutgers, teaches piano at Rutgers, and has a nonprofit called the Center for Musical Excellence that helps folks get to the United States or supports musicians who want to pursue musical training in the United States, and offers whatever that may be that they need, from lessons to travel to a suit. I think Min mentions one participant in this program needed a suit for an audition or a competition. So really supporting musicians of the next generation in many ways. I want to say that, a lot of the folks who come onto the TRILLOQUY podcast are people whose work I'm familiar with, or people that I know personally, but this was not the case for Min. Min came to me by suggestion from someone from the press, and I wasn't sure how to approach this dialogue because, as many longtime listeners, or maybe even short-time listeners to the TRILLOQUY podcast can imagine, an artist who puts together a series of works under the banner of America/Beautiful. I'm gonna raise an eyebrow, but it really speaks to the degree to which we have to come to dialogues with open minds and open hearts, and potentially realize that folks who we don't know or whose works we're unfamiliar with may be more aligned with us than we realize. So I'll get more into that following our dialogue, but I really hope that you'll enjoy this conversation. I really enjoyed meeting Min Kwon, and encourage you to take everything that you can from this really important dialogue on the subject of America and what it means to be a musician in this time when we're all asking ourselves what it really means to be an American, what it means to love America, and all of its challenges, and all of the ways that we may need to explore that for ourselves. To get us into our chat, I'm going to excerpt an addition to this America/Beautiful collection of tunes. This one is by Daniel Bernard Romain. It's called America Never Beautiful, performed here, of course, by Min Kwon. Enjoy this brief excerpt of music by Daniel Bernard Romain as performed by Min, and enjoy our conversation. More from me on the other side.
America, first of all, it's home to me. It's a place that I always go back to after I travel or after I've left it. Um, and it's a place I think I can be creative, um, that I can be myself. Um, And it's a place of course, opportunities and dreams and all that. And that the ideal America that I learned about and I came to. And if your question is about how do we feel about America today, um, I still love our country, and I think we all want our country to do well. That's a common denominator, right? And we have all chosen to be here and to live here. And somehow we'll find ways to come out of it. We'll find ways to be better, make it better, get better. And we all have a part in it.
I think
Mm.
caring about America is why we have these conversations and why
Yeah,
we fight. I feel like if I didn't care about America, if I didn't love
absolutely.
America, it could burn up, it could go to hell and I wouldn't care, but that's not the case.
Right. And I think that's what's beautiful about it, that you can of course be sad or be critical or be cynical and in your corner complaining and right. But then that's exactly it. We wanted to do better, and we want to continue to talk about it and to have this conversation. And I think with the gift that we have, with the resources that we are given.
From reading a little about you, I understand that you came to the United States in your early teens. I wonder what you remember about your idea of America being before you arrived and how that evolved or how that's evolved over your life so far.
Oh, yes, I came here when I was 13, 14, and that's, oh my God, that's a long time ago. Uh, but look, the America that I read about, that I envisioned. So growing up in Korea, and I was this aspiring young pianist, musician, and we had this brand new music magazine. Um, and it was expensive. So I had to really convince my parents to please buy me one. And it was about Western music and it was about the classical music. And it looked all shiny and glossy, beautiful pictures and text. But because the magazine itself was so expensive, I just really devoured it. I read every word. Um, and there was an article about Curtis Institute. And then I thought, oh my God, this sounds like a dream, with all the alumni, all the amazing artists that have um, gone to school there, have taught there and whatnot. And it said that school gives you Steinway piano to practice on while you're a student. And, of course, not to mention it's all full scholarship, school.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, oh, could this be true? I mean, really, literally, this is a dream. America must be a dreamland. Um, and I thought, I need to go here. So that's how my dream began. And long story short, it wasn't that easy because it involved my parents having to look for ways to come to America because they weren't going to just send a 13, 14-year-old, to go by myself to start a new life. And
Hmm.
um, so that was challenging time. So my America through this music magazine, right? I guess. And then the America that I came to, and of course I started in Philadelphia. Yeah, so I did get into the school of my dreams.
Hmm.
So that was good beginning. And I remember my first experiences of just being on the street and seeing all these people of different shapes and sizes and colors and right. And that was a huge shock, of course, because in Korea, we're all Koreans. We all speak the same language and we all kind of look the same, you know? So that cultural shock. And just I was very young, so it was about just adjusting to this new world. But you know what? It was exciting. It was terrifying too. Um, and it also kind of implied in so many ways my parents became so busy in just making a day-to-day living, right? And I had a very
Hmm.
young, I still have a young, much younger violinist sister, and everybody was doing their thing. And even though I was only 14, it was very clear to me I need to become independent. I need to be able to take care of myself. I need to be focused. And that meant I needed to already know what my passion and what my sort of life's calling should be or could be. A lot was at stake.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
To have gotten into the Curtis Institute in your early teens, I imagine that you had some really serious training as an even younger child. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, do you really want to know? It involved getting up at 7, but earlier, sometimes 5:30, because this is the funny thing. I would have lessons with Mrs. Sokolov, Eleanor Sokolov. God bless her. She passed away at age 106. And she
Wow.
was someone who was still teaching a few months before she passed. I mean, such a spirit. But when I started with her, I think she was in her 70s, right? And I remember this 13, 14-year-old thinking, wow, she's old. But she wanted our lessons to be at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. And we had two weekly 2-hour lessons.
Wow.
One or first hour was dedicated to purely, I guess that you could say technical, um, um, Pishna, Josephi scales and arpeggios and every Bach prelude and fugue, and then Chopin etudes. And then the second day of lesson is on the repertoire. But then we studied every nocturne, every Beethoven sonata, even if, not deeply well enough, but it was important for her that I was on this kind of diet and just learning, reading um, the repertoire, right?
Hmm.
But funny thing is, I remember I used to get up at 5:30 to be warmed up, to have practice, to be ready for this 7:30 lesson. And as it got colder and, as we get into the winter, you know how dark it is in the morning to get up. And
Sure.
of course, I would keep snoozing the alarm and I would wake up later and later. Sometimes it was like 7:29. Oh, I'm late. And I would run to my lesson. But she was always so prepared. I remember opening the door with her perfect head and makeup and outfit, and just made me very embarrassed for showing up late for my lesson. So that was the kind of discipline. And then the reason the lessons were so early in the morning was because I had to go to then high school after the lesson, which started at probably 8:45 or something like that. And then high school ended around, it was a private school with early morning courses, and I would come home around 1:32 and then begin my Kurdish classes in the afternoon
Wow. Wow.
and then practice and so on. Yeah.
So it seems like if I look at your career now, that discipline really set you up for success. I wonder if you could talk about the transition from being a student into getting to be a professional.
Well, since I started rather young at Curtis, spent 5 years there, and then I went to Juilliard and did my master's and doctorate there, and then gradually started to performing. I just feel it's never enough. Discipline, I think it's part of being an artist. And, because we can't just sit on our accomplishment of yesterday, that like an athlete, you just have to show up every day. You have to show up every day and maybe even do everything all over again, hopefully do it better. So it doesn't really matter what you did yesterday. So in that sense, the continuation of having a goal, aspiration, I think just it feeds each other. So I don't really think of it as, oh, the discipline, the hard work, but you just do what it takes to get things done.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And and you're so much more than than a pianist. You know, you've taught and you've gone into other ventures. There's so many people who go to Curtis, who go to Juilliard with the goal of simply being that musician, maybe even being a soloist. You've engaged so many other things. I wonder if you could talk about how that came into your life.
Ah, I think yes and no. I think we all are doing something and everything all at once. Sometimes it's not enough in a way, and not it's not because of necessity or the society or our time demands it, but I think it's not enough to just sit at home, play piano, or to even to perform. I think this life embraces all this other aspect. I think teaching for me was always very, very natural. And maybe because, and I also started it very young, partly because my sister being 9 years younger,
Mm.
and I was the one who I played violin and cello um, before settling on piano. So we had these instruments at home. So I remember making my sister play, she was 5, play violin. And then it was fun teaching her to play. And then, all these mock lessons and auditions became a real thing. And she auditioned for Juilliard when she was 8 and got in to the pre-college. So that means my first student, let's say, and I was only 17, right, got into Juilliard pre-college to Miss Dorothy DeLay's studio. So, um, and I think ever since I was always teaching. So that is one aspect of being a musician, being an artist. Um, and of course, students teach you so much. And then being a founder or director of this nonprofit that I have, Center for Musical Excellence, I think it also came very naturally to me because I've gone through this path of coming to America with a dream. And when I felt, okay, I have all these friends now in the field, mentors or partners in crime, and it's now my turn to help other young people who are doing the same thing. So again, that felt very natural. So when I started the organization, I really didn't know anything about what nonprofit even was. I
Mhm.
remember it was one of my sabbatical semester, and I just got together with a couple of former students of mine, and we just sat down and we started like formulating who do we want to help? How do we want to bring them here? And then what are the cause, And so it just kind of evolved. And CME to this day it's not just one thing. It's not, okay, we give scholarship or we give concerts. It's very individualized support. So for some, it's been sponsoring Carnegie Hall debut recital or debut album. To others, it I had this 10-year-old boy coming from Vietnam who ended up going to Juilliard pre-college. And for him, it was getting him a suit to be able to play a concert
Mm.
and finding him a home with the Steinway piano. He just got very lucky. But he needed that. So everyone needs sort of a different kinds of support and help, right? And I like that very much, that I can also be creative in finding support for other young artists. Um, so just to go back to your question, I think just one thing led to another, plus the fact that I remember after all that training, Curtis, Juilliard, maybe, okay, I confess, maybe there was a time that I wanted to be the next or Korean Marta Argerich,
Mhm.
or I was gonna win Chopin competition by age 20. You know what I mean? Of course, I did have all those dreams and aspirations because after all, you need that because that's what brings you to the standards and um, the work ethics, right? But then I also immediately realized after having gone on a couple of tours as a solo artist, it was really lonely and um it wasn't fulfilling enough, can I say. And then I thought, what is this? Because of course I love music, but I don't just love Grieg piano concerto, or I
Mhm.
don't need to be touring on, with this concerto to have a fulfilling life in music. I just knew right away there had to be more. And then I started thinking, wait, I love chamber music. And it's because, being a pianist is a very isolated solitary existence anyway. We don't even have like orchestras to go and play. We can't be with our friends and colleagues in a band, or right. So for
Hmm.
us, only way to be with others is to play chamber music. And then I remember just being so elated being in the room with my friends, you know. So that was another avenue of which, from just playing solo to, okay, I need to play chamber music, and I need to be teaching, and I need to be helping other people.
Hmm.
And then having a job here at Rutgers, now it's been already 20 plus years. Every year I am just um what's the word? I reassured, because we have all these auditions every year, and we see young artists coming from all over the place with, again, the same dream. But I see myself when I was that age, like, you love music, but you don't quite know where to go to get that help or that
Hmm.
training or that mentorship, right? And that's why sometimes these young artists nowadays go play like 10 different auditions. They do a audition tour. So for me, being older, being more experienced, also knowing all these teachers and mentors, um, I feel like I can kind of pinpoint, I see this in you, or you could be doing this and that, not just playing solo recital. So I think that just the musical world for me is big. It's all encompassing. It's all embracing. It has room for, I think, every kind of personality and aspirations. And I think we can get a lot done when your room keeps growing larger.
How do we inspire in the next generation your perspective on this natural progression and how different mediums, different professions come into the mix? Because as you mentioned, there was a time when, in your words, you uh, aspired to be the Korean Martha Argerich. Um, so that sort of thing is important. But at the same time, I think there's this underlying idea that a person who doesn't have the opportunity to spend 100% of their time performing is less than as a performer. I wonder, what you think about that conversation. Again, how can we inspire in the next generation the idea that you're allowed to be more than one thing and really great, even excellent at all of those things?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. The students that I work with, and I feel very privileged that, I think if you were maybe teaching at a very high-end conservatory like Curtis and Juilliard, they tend to be a bit more focused, and maybe they want to be the next Martha Argerich, right? Um, but one of the things I loved coming to Rutgers and being at the state university and listening to the band or the choir or even music education majors. And I would ask these students, what is your goal? What do you want to do? And they want to simply teach music classes in a public school system, and be a choir director in their local church or whatnot. And I just found all these dreams to be so beautiful. And that's exactly it. Like, I don't think, playing at Carnegie Hall should be the goal of young musicians today. Because, at the end of the day, of course, that's so wonderful and it requires such high level of talents and dedication. But I'm a believer in that the music actually is not for those people who can afford to pay subscription or tickets to come to Carnegie Hall and New York Philharmonic and to hear the concerts.
Hmm.
But actually, the kind of people that really need music is near us, around us, and they are the ones who can't afford the time, even, you
Sure.
know. Yeah, even affording a time, actually, it's a luxury when you're worried about daily day to day living, and with obligations of taking care of elderly or children or you know people around you, right? Going to concerts, to many people, I found out, and that's exactly the thing that kind of changed me, is a real luxury. So then I think our musicians job is to bring music to those people, right? Don't make them come to Carnegie Hall, but you bring your music to these people. So I think one of the things that we talk about a lot at CME and with my young artists, and they are all amazingly gifted people from these conservatories that actually we talked about. But it's important to bring your compassion, like your last name, compassion. I love this word, um, to the places. And I think one of the fellowships actually I had at Juilliard, right, is a TRILLOQUY fellowship, is to go out to hospitals and um, centers where people of mental, physical handicaps and needs are, and bring your story and to kind of lighten their days, you know. And I think that's so much more. Of course, you can't compare, but it is definitely rewarding than making somebody who bought a ticket to Carnegie Hall and had a wonderful evening, preceded by expensive dinner. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
find so much more meaning in doing this kind of work.
For the
Yeah.
students, for the young musicians who find you or you find them through CME, I wonder what that process looks like. Do the students apply? How do these kids get on your radar?
Yeah, good question again. So, I um both, because it's the way that we want to, and the other is just simply we don't have the resource to promote what we do. So it's a very small boutique organizations, right?
Mm,
And but I've had it now. We just celebrated our 15th year. Um, but we have many, many, many wonderful alumni and really star young artists that have received support from us. So I actually handpick each of them. So there is no audition, or there isn't any way one actually formally apply. But through all my colleagues, they all teach in all these universities, conservatories, or I would go to concerts and I happen to hear somebody, or through recommendations. But I think what I try is also, because there are so many wonderful organizations out there that are very helpful to young artists these days. So, and I mean, who am I? I'm just this one person who's sort of juggling many, many jobs myself. But I do what I can, and that is, uh, I handpick personally, and when I choose to bring somebody on, usually all of these relationships are um, for very long term.
mm.
I get to know them, and it's more than just 1 or 2 year, and I make sure that these are not just wonderful players and smart people. You need both, but really one very kind of curious individuals, um, also thirsty for um, opportunities that are not just about you, but opportunities to invite others to your musical world, right? And for example, I make them write an essay,
Hmm.
and we have a thing called Dream Project. So I don't just ask for audition videos or let's see how you play, but I want to read about and hear about, what do you want to do with your gift? How do you think you could help the next person? um yeah, so we pick based on those kind of credentials.
So you identify students based on those sorts of credentials. From, in your view, what is it that they need to bring to the table? We've already talked about, determination and discipline. What are some of the other ingredients that you're looking for from these students once they're selected?
I think in a way the modesty and then maturity
Hmm.
to know that some of the things I talked about, winning competition or performing on the big stages, for wealthy patrons is not our goal. That is not our priority. But the more people that you can touch along the way and having them to join kind of your calling um, to the place that you're going to, hopefully a brighter, um, better place, more compassionate place. Because what is music after all? Um, it really, I think everyone, life without music, I'm not the one saying it. Nietzsche, I think, said it first, is a mistake, right? But when you turn around, look around you, there is no place without music. It is really the soundtrack of your life. So it's it's not a luxury, it's really a necessity,
Hmm.
right? So when you think of it like that, I think that our job, I don't even want to say job, is not that different than someone at the cashier stand at grocery. Look, we need food. We need food to live, right? It's a sustenance. And music is sustenance for the soul, right? And we are the carrier of that. So I feel that people that work at grocery stores, we need them, right? Because we need to go buy food,
Hmm.
right? And our job is kind of the same. I don't know if I'm making a good analogy of this, is that music is so visceral and um, it's just life sustenance. That's how I see it. So I think more we can bring ourselves down in a way from this kind of museum mentality that or what we are doing is so special. Um, that I'm going to practice X amount of hours and then win this competition and, go play there. But it really can start from just around you, you know? Like I remember I was a young student, but I just walked into a nursing home and I just went to the front reception and I said, "Don't you need music here?"
Hmm.
I remember doing that. Because all of those elderly people were just sitting there and just watching TV, and they all looked like there was no spirit in their eyes. They were just going through the motion kind of thing. And then I remember saying, "Yeah, don't you need music? Let me come and play something." And then we started this like little concert series that was, um, regular for a while until I couldn't do it anymore. But just something like that.
That's beautiful. That's
Just
beautiful.
normalizing what we do. It's not all that special. I think brain surgery, heart surgery is very special, but right. um
It sounds like
yeah.
you're creating citizens. It's more than just high class
Oh,
musicians, just overall great people or people who are very much aware of their surroundings, aware of their role toward the common good.
absolutely. Like in a way, I think it helps to kind of normalize it. Like, look, we need plumbers, we need electricians, right? If
Hmm.
something breaks down, we need them in our home. But it's same with music too. Like everyone needs it. And if there's a place for us to go, or even young people to teach or to show them something, to inspire them and make their lives a little bit better that day, I think that should be the goal of all of us.
So
Anyway.
I also wanted to talk about your own project, America Beautiful, which has been years in the making at this
Oh,
point.
yes.
What if you could talk a little bit about this project and its development over the years?
Yes, thank you. America Dash Beautiful. So the project was inspired um, artistically by the Diabelli variations, where you bring all these composers. In Diabelli's case, he did it about 200 years ago in Vienna, um, and called it Diabelli variations. And there are 50 composers involved. We just know about the Beethoven, who happened to write the longest variations when the call came. But now, for some time, I've been wanting to create American Diabelli. And when the pandemic came, and after 3, 4 months of being really low and down and sad, and I just had to pick up myself and say, look, people are dying. A lot of people are dying. There's death. Then that means there also has to be some birth, new
Mhm.
life, new meaning, new creation. And that was important to me. And I say this, my husband, who was literally saving lives, he was working at a hospital or, or seeing people die. And for musicians, our concerts were canceled. People started playing online for each other. We were playing Bach because we couldn't even play with pianists. So had to be solo pieces and whatnot. But then I thought there has to be more that we as artists can do. So for me, again, talking about something very natural and organic. So I just started to think about what can we do for America, in America, by us Americans. Yeah. And then I just simply, because we all now had the time to go to my computer every morning and just started listening and researching who are these Americans creating something. And I think I've been very neglectful until that time. I mean, I've done some premieres and I've worked with composers, but still I was very much rooted in the traditional, Western European repertoire, right? Because
Mhm.
I was trained as a classical pianist, studying at these conservatories and teaching this um, traditional repertoire. I wasn't a specialist in any means, but I think this process of just sitting and listening, and I couldn't believe for hours and hours, because you know how one thing led to another. And I felt in a way so embarrassed that what? I call myself a musician because I really didn't know anything. It was like, right, touching, feeling the tip of the iceberg that is called American music.
Mhm.
What is this? And also, what's unique about American composers is that they all have all this experience that's only possible, unique in America. Jazz, rock, pop, this American culture that
Mhm.
other European composers don't have, right? Um, and then simply I started when I was moved by a style or the sound world. I just started to reach out to these people, email, texting, got on the call and Zoom, and then started to convince them, uh, please write something. And then I remember thinking, what should that something be? It's a difficult time. What is American? Should it be Yankee Doodle or should it be Amazing Grace? You know, is it Star Spangled? But then I thought, yes, America the Beautiful. Not because America is beautiful, but it is our ideal and it's our hope and it's our founding credo. And also this pluribus unum, out of many one, also this concept. So everything started to come into place. And I would have been very happy with five variations or even 10 or 20. But then it started to just kind of expand. And then before I knew it, there were 50 people saying yes and 76 now. And only because I had to stop because this was really more than I could handle. Because
Mhm.
now I stopped at 76 composers because 1776, inspired
Oh,
by
wow,
that
yeah.
number of American history. Yeah, that's why it's 76 composers now. And um, it's but it's 5 hours of new music written that time so that future generation we can all go back and say, that pandemic year, that COVID that killed everybody, but there was also birth of this America Beautiful project where all these incredible composers put their ego or agenda aside, and they could come together united, um, for a project or a call like this, and that I think that's the part I'm most proud of. There was, I'm going to tell you a secret.
Mhm.
One of the composers, yeah, maybe it's not a secret so much, but um, did tell me, man, this is a terrible idea. Don't call these composers, just pay me X amount of money. There was a lot of money, and I can write you as many variations as you want.
Hmm.
And to him, that was the logical answer. He just really couldn't understand why I was calling so many people. But and I wanted to tell him, which I didn't, is that it's not about you. You don't get it, right? It's America is about many of us. It's not about one of us, or right. And the project also needed to have a lot of people, otherwise it didn't make sense. um and now the youngest composer is 20. He was 20, even 19 at the time. He just got into Juilliard, Tyson Davis. And then our oldest composer is Sam Adler, who's 96. So that's an incredible range of not just, generational, cultural. Um, Sam Adler taught three generations of composers, and many in the project also, like Monroe, Rina
Mm,
Esmail, Nico Muhly, all studied with him
yeah.
too. Um, so I can't even begin to tell you. The thing is, we all need to invest some time to really check it out and to listen. And that's going to be made easier now because the 5 set CDs um, are coming out very shortly, very soon in the future, May 8th. Um, but I think there are actually about 84 tracks on it, because
Wow.
there's a secret piece called Anonymous, and I play the theme. And also, I enlisted my brother-in-law, who is a tenor, to sing the original America the Beautiful. So basically, this collection is staggering, um, assortment, array of feelings, moods, expressions. Not to mention styles and backgrounds and all that. That all these composers, they're very honest. They're very raw, because it started to come out at a time that we were all so very vulnerable. And none of this was like commercial, in the sense, I say I commissioned these composers, but actually so many of them did it for free, just because they
Wow.
wanted to. Yeah. Some of the actually biggest names and inspiring composers said, I don't need the money. And what I could do then was to give that money to a young composer. And I call those composers discovery composers. And they are really the ones that needed exposure and the financial support at the time, and even now. So that's what project is. And I am just so humbled, and I feel so grateful that it's not a one-time thing. It's going to have a long life, and it's still living, it's still evolving, because America is evolving every time. Every day we wake up and turn on the news, there's something else happening.
Hmm.
And you know what? There's a different piece. There's something for everyone that represents everyone. Um, if you go to the website and look at all our composers, they look like, some of your neighbors. And each one of them has expressed what's beautiful about America. What do you want the America to be like or to sound like? Um, and so again, out of many, one. And I think that's where I go back to this notion of we all want America to do well, um, to be the best country in the world. I think that's why we are still here. But what is your part in it? What are
Mm.
you going to do about it?
Something that you made me think of is going back to this idea of one aspect of our lives feeding into and informing other aspects of our lives, other forms of our career. All of the time that you spent in front of the computer and discovering for yourself these different sounds, these different composers, these different aesthetics. I wonder how that impacted your personal practice or even your teaching. I mean, are there new works that you encourage your students to practice that are beyond the Western European canon, based on the time that you've spent with all of these composers and all of this relatively new music?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are two answers to that wonderful question. So on artistic level, as performers, I think we approach this music from outside in.
Mm,
Um, but working with these composers, now I'm finally versed in, I mean, it's still a process and a journey in learning, is that I am now taught to think like them and to think from inside out. And that means I play better because I understand them better. And one of the biggest lessons um, of doing projects like this is, you know, how people say you can't call up Beethoven and ask questions, but with these composers, yes, you can. But even before that, I have to admit, when all this sheet music started to arrive, it was like a Christmas, every day, new piece in your
Hmm.
mailbox, right? Then it's like meeting a new neighbor or a new person that didn't look like you or that didn't sound like you, that came from a different kind of culture or background or parents. I have to say, I didn't understand it. I can't say I think I mentioned already earlier. If you have given me another Schubert sonata that I hadn't played, I would have much easier time playing it, understanding it, because that's
Hmm.
what been in my blood, or I was trained to do so. But now this process taught me. So when I didn't understand something, and I would play and I read, and the sound was, it was really bad. And you can ask my I had two very young daughters growing up at the time. It's already 5 years ago when I first started, right? Almost, yeah. Probably it sounded terrible, you know, and dissonant, right? And then, but then I could go back to all these composers and we could workshop. Why this chord here? What are you trying to do? Why this meter? And why is this changing to this sound, you know? And then, you know what? As soon as they started to explain things to me, everything made sense. And that means I could then be in their shoes and I would be a better messenger, interpreter of their music. Now, that same skill applies now to playing Brahms or Chopin, right? And so, as an artist, I grew so much from this experience, and now that's exactly what I want to transmit to my students. And yes, the second phase of now this project is so many of other young artists, young or old. I want all anyone who's interested and curious to now play these pieces. Again, the project, these 76 new pieces, they're not for me. They're not, well, they were written for me, but they are now added to the canon of this new American repertoire, piano music, right? So I would like all these other people to have a look, have a listen, and want to play it, right? So that's been the work now. And did I answer your questions?
Yes,
Is
yes.
that
I have one more question that I want to close with, but before we get there, I wonder how people can learn more about the Center for Musical Excellence and to be up to date about the release of America Dash Beautiful.
so for Center for Musical Excellence? Again, I am very humbled that you ask about this, but it's a very small boutique. It was just my small dream 15 years ago. I'm so lucky that it has blossomed into what it is, and but you know, it's very modest. But you can find all about it at cmemusic.org, and we do have a Facebook and an Instagram page and all that stuff. And for my America Beautiful, there's a website, america-beautiful.com. And there are a couple of singles that have been released already. May 8th, the complete set drops. And the recordings by Delos, which is now part of Out Here label. And I recorded these with late producer, Grammy winning Adam Apes House. And this was the last project that he worked on. And so, and he and I really delved into it. We had so much fun working on these pieces together. So I really dedicate and I want to honor him with this album.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So I wanted to, in asking this final question, I wanted to go back to what you said earlier about coming to the United States and how the diversity of the people you saw was, you know, a huge part of your memory in that time. I think that diversity is realized through more than how we look, but in what we eat how we dress, and of course, the diversity of the musical landscape that you've spoken to a little bit. It's been a core part of my career as a musician, as an advocate, as a producer, to really help people appreciate this diversity of music, even within what we call classical, because there's so much more than what we may have learned in school or what we may hear in a concert hall. But this work isn't always easy. People, as you know, love their Beethoven. They love their Schubert. They love their Schumann. So all of that to ask, I wonder, in your view, how do we as professionals really catalyze a curiosity around the diversity of music that we have to explore? I know that, certain school curriculum, conservatory curriculum require certain things. You want everyone graduating from school to know certain aspects of the European canon, but at the same time, there's so much more. What are your thoughts on normalizing the curiosity that will ultimately broaden the way that we think about our field, the way that we think about classical music?
Yes, it's really an ongoing project or homework for all of us, isn't it? But maybe it's because I grew up in New York or Philadelphia. So even to me, being in this diverse society or everyone looking a little bit different, that's again been so natural, right? And here's a little story. I remember I would go back to Korea. I feel now more American than Korean, but I would go back to Korea, and there was this all women's college, and I was standing on stage and giving a master class and lecture, and I look out, and because they're also all in uniform, but there were like hundreds of these young girls, but to me, they all of a sudden looked all so much the same. And I remember just feeling so flustered. Why is this? Because this is where I came from, right? When I was growing up in Korea, this was the school. But now that I'm so used to this diversity that you talk about, and I find that to be so beautiful that we have all kinds of people from all different backgrounds that came to America and they formed this society. So now how Korea looked felt more strange and foreign to me. And I think maybe perhaps classical music is sort of that way. Um, and I think we agree. What is even classical music? Why do we really continue to call it classical music? Because that term itself is really throwing dots at, like, it's so questionable, right? It's not classical, it's not romantic, it's not contemporary. We should just call it music. Or we could describe it with some sort of adjective, but not that, like, words that categorize or put things in a box like that. And through the project also, I learned that, oh my God, there's so much more to music that I love, right? It's not just Schubert, but because music is a catalyst and for being a connector, right? And it's the human connection that's enabled by music, right? And diversity, I'm looking at you, and I'm going to see my students now from so many different countries that have come to study in the state university in New Jersey.
Hmm.
Um, I was recently giving a master class in Vienna. I was teaching Beethoven Sonata to a Japanese male student. And during this class, it just hit me for a second. Oh my God, here I am, a Korean female person teaching this Austrian Beethoven to a Japanese male student. Now, if you know the history of Korea and Japan, I don't have to tell you. And
Yeah.
we all bear sometimes hurtful, complicated history. And as Americans, the same too, right? But what are we? We're not learning from it and making changes and improvements from it. And I think, again, that's one of the things I celebrate. And I think we should all celebrate. Being American, I think, is that. And I think for me, that's the most beautiful part of being American, that we can celebrate this diversity like nobody else can in no other countries. And I think that applies to this thing called classical music. If someone that grew up practicing Beethoven and Chopin and Rachmaninoff can create a project like this that brings 76 composers of such diverse background to write something based on one theme, right? America the Beautiful. Then I think all of us, all of you, we all can. It's just wanting to do it. And I think we all just need a little bit of encouragement. And I think today, um, somebody's knocking on my studio, so eager to come in. That we have opportunity to spread this enthusiasm or call for action, can we say it, to the person next. And I think that's the only way to do it.
Pianist Min Kwon featured in that performance of Christian Yarvy's Look Up America. That tune, of course, a part of the broader America Dash Beautiful project. Wonderful work by Christian and beautifully performed by Min. I really appreciate Min taking the time to chat with me. I have links in the description of this opus for you to check out more about her, the Center for Musical Excellence, this project, America Dash Beautiful, and lots in between. So huge, huge thanks to Min and to everyone who helped make this conversation possible. So, as I alluded to ahead of this interview, I'm going to be Trill here. When I first learned about this project, I was really hesitant and wasn't sure if this was the type of thing I wanted to feature on the TRILLOQUY podcast. As we approach this 250th anniversary of the United States, I know there's just going to be a lot of celebration without nuance of this country and its history, celebrations that don't acknowledge the attempted extermination of all indigenous peoples here, acknowledgments that leave out the story of Black Americans. We love to talk about the United States as this country of immigrants, which in many ways it is, but Black folks like myself, Black Americans, are not immigrants. And I feel like a lot of that is left out in these conversations around America. But of course, as you heard in the conversation, Min has a very real life and very nuanced approach to this idea of America and responds to it in the best way that she can, in a way that I feel like acknowledges several different stories, several different experiences, acknowledges privilege, acknowledges areas of need, and just brings it all together. So again, what that says for me is that there's so much work that each of us can do on an individual level, really really taking a chance with dialogue, really reaching across the proverbial aisle, however you define the aisle, and understanding someone else's perspective. Conversations and thought processes like these remind me of the time that I spent in Knoxville. That was a very interesting time of my life, but a very important time of my life. It's very much the most politically, culturally conservative place that I've ever lived. Hopefully the most conservative place I ever will live. But it gave me the opportunity to see the human side of people that I wouldn't otherwise see. I won't name anybody, but I'm thinking about a couple folks in particular that I'm not in contact with anymore who, with the way things are going in politics today, see me as the opposition, see me as someone who is not to be reasoned with, as someone who's insufferably woke. I guess I shouldn't put words in their mouth, but these are people who I have attempted to reach out to and to continue talking with, considering the degree of friendship we were able to develop while I was in Knoxville. But so many things can be lost in translation behind social media posts and just general outward facing ideas about where we all stand. I'm thinking of another situation in which I'll say a family member, someone on yeah, a family member made a post about basically the post was saying, oh, all of these people who oppose ICE just hate America and should immediately be deported. If you're anti-ICE, you should be deported. Well, I communicated as softly as I could how a post like that marginalizes me and sort of is hurtful for me to see, someone that I consider a family member posting that. And they took it down. I think they saw the human side of my perspective on that and broadened their compassion in a way that in that moment prompted them to take that post down. I could name all sorts of other examples of how this has shown up in my life, just an ability, a willingness or an unwillingness to hear a different perspective and how that raises barriers. It's really a core tenet, one of the core tenets of my Buddhist practice, as that shows up in contemporary society today. The Buddhist philosopher Daisaku Ikeda traveled the world over the course of his life, engaging in dialogue with not just folks who were Buddhists, but people who were Christians, people who were Muslims, people who had no religious inclination. But he really centered that humanism, that radical humanism that worked to identify that we all have more in common than we don't have in common. And that's something that, as a practitioner and someone who chants Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that's something that I'm always aspiring to more and more every day. And of course, it's all about evolution. It's not difficult to go into the history of this show, of this podcast, and hear me saying some really ugly things about some people that I disagree with, cussing them out and everything else. But, we're all growing. I'm looking at the plants as I record this in my apartment right now. Those are growing and blooming in beautiful ways that I didn't think I would be able to steward. I've never had a green thumb. And I think that applies to my own personal state. There are just degrees of humanism that have grown in me that have allowed me to have a more sensitive look at people who I disagree with on fundamental, foundational things. Of course, reaching across that aisle, having dialogue with people who are different than us requires that view of each other that's human. I can't talk to someone who doesn't see me as human. And there are a lot of people who feel that way, whether it's based on my race, on the way that my gender is expressed, on my sexuality. So that is what it is. I can't change people's perspective on that. But for anyone who is willing to see me as a human being, I think there's room for dialogue and there's room for connection. And that's what I really want to inspire in you listening to this right now. It's a lot of reasons for us to build up walls and separate ourselves from people in this country, especially with the leader that we have in the White House. But I believe there's even more reason to take those assumptions, put them to the side, and really learn. I had some assumptions coming into my conversation with Min about her engagement of America, the way that she thinks about the history of this country, and those assumptions were dismantled in the conversation that I had. I hope that you were able to hear. It wasn't a scripted conversation. I came with real curiosity, with a real sense of wanting to learn more and to discover. And I think if we can all practice that in our everyday lives, we will make America beautiful. That's not an overnight thing. It's not even something that's going to happen over a single generation, but I think we all can be the droplets in what needs to be that giant ocean to recompose America. Shout out to ACF. I think we can all be those droplets in our daily lives. So find someone Well, I won't say find someone you disagree with because, I want everyone to stay safe. But I guess identify an opportunity in your life to reach across that aisle, to show gentleness where you don't see gentleness. Violence begets violence. I think gentleness begets gentleness. That smile, that just willingness to understand someone else's perspective is so needed and so invaluable today. Hope I've made my point. Enough blabbering from me. Continue to enjoy your time. Thanks again for listening to the Trilloquy podcast, and I'll share another one with you soon. Peace.